I want to introduce our president, Dr. Joylyn Blake. I told her when I was sitting there, I was going to introduce her in terms of bringing a sense of African American excellence. And I mean that from my heart. We take for granted when we get African American administrators or Latino administrators or administrators from the Asian diaspora, but in our minds, unfortunately, some of us think that they're lesser than, and they are here only because we got to have some black, brown, and Asian faces. That's not true. Dr. Blake brings to us because of her experiences. She's blessed to have been at 2 basic aid districts where excellence and vision is expected. She chose to come here. She could have gone to one of those other districts that wanted her. She chose to come here and service those of us who live in Oakland, Alameda, Emeryville, but we live west of 580. And to create a climate that it makes no difference the color of our skin or the economics of our households, that we have a right to excellence and vision. It's evidenced by signs that are up on the campus. We're getting ready to get a learning center for faculty development. And yes, she pushes us all, and we're probably calling her names at midnight because we're exhausted. But you know what? If we're going to get to excellence, we can't work just from 8 to 4:30. So I appreciate her, I love her, and I believe that God put her here. Dr. Blake.
Thank you, Dean Cook. You know, I just really enjoyed Tony because as I was sharing with our speaker, you know, sometimes in the evening when I'm tired and a little frustrated, I just go and bathe myself in her wisdom. And it's just comforting and gives me a peace and a continued persistence and tenacity about what I'm charged to do as college president. And she's right, I did have other options. But, but I met with one of my mentors to talk about my choice in terms of where I chose to be college president. And what he told me and asked me to think about is where are you going to make a difference? You know, where are you going to have the most impact? And given what I think my core mission is as a professional, as a human being, and my belief in empowering and uplifting humanity, I chose to come to Alameda because I thought there was great opportunity to have a major impact on a community and empower folks to excel and be the best they can be. So I just really appreciate the opportunity to serve you and to support your dreams, your goals, and what it is that we do here at the College of Alameda. And part of that, and my interest last year when I came and bringing the Breaking Barriers lecture series, working with Luis and the other Luis, and putting together a speaker series, was bringing folks from the outside that can help us understand what it will take to break the barriers. I have the honor, the humble honor, of introducing Ericka Huggins, and I want to thank Dean Cook for recommending that we bring her this year for our series. She's a human rights activist, a poet, an educator, a Black Panther leader, and former political prisoner. She served the Black Panther Party for 14 years, the longest of any woman in leadership. She was the director of the Black Panther Party's Oakland Community School from 1973 to 1981. Ericka has a master's degree in sociology, and she has taught sociology in the Peralta colleges, lectured at Stanford, Cornell, and UCLA. She is a highly sought after speaker. Ericka, she brings a unique, complete, and honest perspective to the challenges and successes of the Black Panther Party and its significance today. if you're available tomorrow at the district office, they'll be showing on Peralta TV a documentary screening on the film of the origins of the Black Panther Party, and it'll be tomorrow at noon, so if you want to look at that. And you know, there's a quote that I discovered that says, "Your truth matters." And so as I say that, I want to honor Ms. Huggins because her truth matters and made a difference in the course of the history of the United States. So thank you for holding to your truth.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Oh, that was so weak. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Yay. Okay. So why are you here to shout out? To see me? Don't have a clue? What? To receive a blessing. Don't have a clue. Well, to learn. What's your name? Hi, Stanley. Why are you here? So I want to speak about what you want to hear about, not what's in my head. I could tell you a lot of things, and we can also have a dialogue. But what do you want to know about? Understanding my the introduction of me, and thank you again for the introduction. Anything? Something? Yes. Yes, I do have a master's in sociology. Yes, and that would then that means I have to tell you my whole life story. So let me give you a synopsis of my life because it's very complicated. And it's complicated because of what I chose to do and how I chose to step forward. And how many of you have stepped forward in your lives? Yeah, everybody has, even the people who didn't raise their hands. We've made a decision to step up and step out because either we needed to do that for ourselves or our families, or because our communities needed that, right? So when I was a little girl in Washington, D.C., I asked my mother, why do some people sleep in their cars in the snow, and then when we go to Capitol Hill, people have on their furs? I was about 10. You understand my question to my mother? And my mother said, well, sugar, well, they just have the money. And I go, is it just that? There was something about her saying it was just the money that didn't quite do it for me. I asked a lot of questions when I was little. And I want to, and I still do, and I'm taller and older. But I want to encourage you to ask questions. There really aren't any unwise questions. Even if somebody tells you they don't like your attitude, when you ask the question, you can soften that over time. But ask the question. It's how we learn. So she said, well, it isn't just about money, it's about skin color. And I go, why? That's so stupid. Because I was 10. It is stupid. Isn't it stupid? Human beings aren't stupid, but sometimes there is really ignorant behavior. I couldn't figure out what my mother was trying to tell me. I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and I couldn't make sense of it. And then when I was 15, I had the opportunity to go to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. There are a lot of marches on Washington, but I happened to be there on that miraculous day in 1963. And when I stood there, long story short, I made a vow to serve people for the rest of my life. I was inspired, believe it or not by any of the speeches, but by Lena Horne singing the word 2 syllables. freedom. And she let those two syllables linger long in the air, and then they fell over our heads. Thousands, it felt like hundreds of thousands of us. And the words entered my ears and then into my heart. And that vow arose. I'll serve people for the rest of my life. And I did not have any sense of how that vow and my life would unfold. Well, a few years later, I decided to go to a historical black university, Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, where at the time that I was there, Stokely Carmichael and Charles Hamilton were writing the little book, it's about this thick, called Black Power. Now, let's pause there for a second. Hi. What does Black Power mean? Because it's been maligned, misinterpreted. We are misinformed about it. But what do those two words together mean? Yes. But the word power, what does that word mean? Strengthen. Yes. Strong. So the book is about African American people, specifically descendants of slaves or of enslaved Africans, reclaiming the power that is inherent at their birth. But it also wasn't just about African American people, nor has anything I've ever done in my life, by the way, nor was the Black Panther Party. Did you know that? We happened to be African American, but we weren't just about black people. Does that put your head on tilt? Yes, because when there is, let's say there is a European American or white organization, we never think of them as a white organization, right? No, we don't. But because of the history of the United States and the economic system of slavery, it was an economic system, right? You owned humans, and then you had what? You had what? A labor force, a free labor force that helped to build this country. So I learned all of this as I was going along. I learned it in Lincoln. I read a lot of books. I didn't read a lot of books. I partied a lot, but I kept this sense of my purpose in life with me. And then I read about the Black Panther Party. I read about Huey Newton. I read about these people who were speaking up for self-defense. And what does it mean, self-defense? Okay. What's an example of self-defense? Yes. Feeding the people in your neighborhood. That's self-defense. Providing health care for people if you're a doctor and you have some free hours to give, like people did at the People's Free Medical Clinics of the Black Panther Party. Somebody raised their, yes?
I believe in that time that speaking of self was not just self, it meant more than that. It was family, it was a nation of individuals. So when I looked at them, I see myself. So self-defense means that I'm defending each and every person that I see as myself.
Right, right. Thank you for that. That was eloquent. However, sometimes when we see one another, we're not in self-defense, huh? Like, ooh, what's she wearing? Ooh, I don't want to talk to him. Ooh, right? I'm just saying. Or we decide based on a person's skin color that we will or will not be with them, allow our children to play with them, talk to them, learn their language, learn about their culture, regard their worship in as much esteem as we do our own. We've gotten into these little boxes, or big boxes, and now we're in a mess. But I digress. So after reading about the Black Panther Party, I wanted to be a school teacher. I didn't do that. I left campus and drove across the country with John Huggins. We were very young, to join the Black Panther Party, and I did so in Los Angeles. And I always wanted to know how systems work, infrastructures and structures of things. I always wanted to know, how does it work? The economic system, the social systems, the political systems. I didn't want to be necessarily involved in them, but I want to know, how are they impacting my life? When I walked into Lincoln University, it was all men. I was one of the first 15 women there. How do you think the infrastructure of that university impacted me? Come on, you could say. It was tempting.
Intimidating.
Oh, thank you. It was no, I wasn't intimidated, but others were by my presence, yes. It was gender bias. It was prejudice, yes. It was old thinking and doing and saying. And the dean of students, you'll love this because you're a dean, and you would never think to do this to anyone. One day I walked into his introduction to education class, ready to learn. I was going to sit in the front row, have my little notebook, and I was very simplistic in my way of being at that time. So I had on a t-shirt and some jeans. And I came in and I moved quietly out of respect for him. He was an elder, to sit in the front row, and he said, "Brazen hussy." And I'm looking. And he says it again, "Brazen hussy." Well, first of all, who uses the word hussy? I'm thinking to myself, I'm asking questions, and I'm thinking, is he speaking to me? And the whole classroom fell silent. And no one said, "How dare you?" Because it was 1967. No one said anything, and I went to him later. I waited until every student was gone, and I went to his desk and I said, "Dean so-and-so, why did you say that about me? You women think you can come in here and change everything. Exactly what do you want?" Have you heard those statements and questions before? Well, I didn't want anything except my education, and I chose Lincoln because of its prestigious background. To me, Langston Hughes was there. Kwame Nkrumah was there. It was a clearinghouse for African students that had come from the continent to come in to the United States for learning. And I said, "But you can't treat me that way. Who is your superior?" "Oh, you don't have to be like that." "Yes, I do. Who's your superior? Because you cannot treat the women that come to Lincoln in this way and expect us not to say anything." I'm all by myself, and I'm shaking because I'm a teenager, and I'm speaking, what do they call it? Truth to power. And I did go to the administration, and I did say something. These are all African American people. There were no white people there to blame. What am I talking about, folks? No, I'm talking about how important it is in every aspect of our lives to say what is true and to be the truth as we walk, as we navigate Earth. And it's hard, and it's scary, and it's dangerous. I didn't know. I could have been thrown off campus. I wasn't. I was appreciated for speaking to him, and the dean was asked to apologize to me, which he didn't. But I did find out that he was suffering his own wounded heart because of what was going on in his life and his family. So then, I'm not at Lincoln anymore. I'm in Los Angeles. I joined the Black Panther Party, and John and I are doing everything. It wasn't like joining anything else. You just walked in, you said, "Yeah, I can sell papers. Yes, I can Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can speak. Yes, I can answer telephones. Yes, I can cook a meal. Yes, I can do anything expected of me. That's what it was like. And then the FBI began its surveillance of us and its harassment of us, and then its jailing of us, and its killing of us. And so on the UCLA campus, on January 17, 1969, John Huggins and my dear friend Bunchy Carter were assassinated. They were killed because of their, have a beautiful day. They were killed because of their beliefs. They were students. And the FBI took some credit for it a year later. But by this time, a heinous organization inside the FBI was created called COINTELPRO, the Counterintelligence Program. It was created by J. Edgar Hoover to wipe out anything that moved. And one of its first expressions was in the labor movement, and one of its first expressions in the civil rights movement was to demean Martin Luther King. And they were famous for sending letters and for making cartoons, for making phone calls that disrupted, miscredited, redirected, and their intention was to neutralize movements. The word neutralize is a very scary word because it means what? Erase, wipe out, kill. And if you go online, just Google COINTELPRO, you'll see their documents have been posted. You'll see their purpose, their mission. So every day I'm grateful to be alive because so many of the people who I know and love are not. So I'm still trying to get to this master's in sociology. So I went to New Haven, Connecticut, where John Huggins' family lived, and was asked to start a chapter of the Black Panther Party, and I did. And our baby was 3 weeks old when he was assassinated. And then she was 3 months old when I was arrested for conspiracy and served 14 months awaiting trial and 6 months on trial. No bail was allowed. And it was there in prison, believe it or not, that I learned how to love myself. I taught myself to meditate. I do that every morning. If I don't, I love earrings, you know. So if I don't meditate, I feel like I'm walking out without my earrings, which is not a pleasant thing for me. What I'm trying to say is that it allowed me to feel free on the inside of that cement and metal box I was in, especially when I was in solitary confinement. So I began to read again and write poetry again, because in the party we didn't have time for anything except work. Our days were like 19 or 20 hours a day. Serving the people, our motto was body and soul. And eventually the charges against me and Bobby Seale, I stood trial with Bobby Seale, were dropped and we were released. And Bobby was extradited to Chicago, where he was a part of a trial that was a horror and a circus all at once. And he was released from that. And I came back to Oakland, and I wanted to go back to school, but I couldn't, because I was raising my daughter, who was then 2.5. And then I got very involved in the Oakland Community School, which was the party's flagship educational program. It was a school for 2.5 to 12-year-olds that was student-centered, community-based, tuition-free, and served 3 meals a day, provided health care, and a lot of love for little human beings. How many of you went to a school like that? Two. And the way that we knew how to do that school wasn't because we'd gone to school for it, I came to understand quite quickly. It was because we knew what we needed, what would have helped us. Don't you know what would have helped you? And we used our collective wisdom with the help of some professors and some scholars who donated their time to write a curriculum. But at the baseline of the curriculum, every class was love. Just love. So that school lasted until the party ended in 1982. And I went on to do many, many things, which I could talk about when we have dialogue. I continue to be an activist for prison abolition. I don't think we need prisons for anything. I don't know why we're still building them. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, what about the murderers and the rapists and the da-da-da-da? Those are this, does that look like a small percent? Yes. Small percentage of people who are in prison. Most of the people who are in prisons and jails, and there are over 2.4 million of them, most of them are there for ridiculous things, like having some weed in their pocket, or writing a bad check, or let's remember 3 strikes. But for the most part, there isn't anything that transforms human beings in the prisons. So we could do community-based justice, like some of the countries in Europe are doing. We could. We could have free health care. We could have free education for everyone, because we're not a poor country. We're not a poor country at all. We're not poor in resources, and we're not poor in skill. So I continue to be an activist in education. By activist, I don't mean that I had a poster and I went to rallies. I mean that I was very active in various communities. I worked for 4 years in HIV/AIDS, volunteering in education and prevention. I traveled the country speaking and teaching about the importance of spiritual practice and social justice work. And then at some point, I went back to teaching in 2003 at Cal State University, East Bay. And I decided that sociology, being all about the systems in place that hold inequity in place, that hold prejudice, as you called it, racism, sexism, homophobia, all of those things are held in place by structures, and they're institutionalized. It's different if a man, one individual man, treats you poorly than if the whole system of, from the top of government down and in all the institutions of society, pay you less than they would a man with the same skills. That's different, isn't it? Because the one man who says something ugly to us, we can just do this. But if the entire society sees us in a less than way, it's different. So this doesn't mean that people who are hearing this or thinking about it for the first time and may not have the impact of those inequities in their lives, it doesn't mean that you should go quickly to guilt and shame, because no one in this room created those systems unless you are an immortal. Any immortals in the room? No. So I decided to enter, while I was teaching at Cal State East Bay, to enter a master's degree program there in sociology. And thank goodness for the wonderful professors. I was in my 50s at the time, but it was great. And I learned so much about all those systems that I kept asking my mother about. How does this work? Well, why is it still there? Well, why can't we just get rid of it? I was able to see why things get so cemented in. So that's the answer to your question. So today I wanted to also talk about teaching in the Peralta Community College District. And I've done so at Berkeley City, at Laney, and at Merritt. And more recently, I taught a class at Merritt for, not this year, but the 2 years before, called under African American Studies, which I also am a instructor for, called the Black Panther Party Strategies for Organizing the People. When we hear about or think about the Black Panther Party, we just think about those photographs of men wearing what? Leather jackets and black berets. Do you think about women? No, not exactly. A composite woman who's some combination of Kathleen Cleaver and maybe one other person whose name you might know. We don't even know all of the wonderful men in the Black Panther Party. And those uniforms didn't last beyond 1972, 73. So what is it that we know? So a great professor at Merritt, how many of you take classes at Merritt? Anybody? You got to meet Professor Siri Brown. Oh, if you haven't already. She's amazing. She asked me to teach that class, and it has transferable units to many other four-year universities, by the way. The class was wonderful because we got to talk about the Black Panther Party's community survival programs. We created the concept for the People's Free Medical Clinics, some of which still exist in the Bay Area, La Clinica being one of them, in the Fruitvale. The Berkeley Free Clinic was another. The Haight-Ashbury Clinic was another. It went on and on like that. And so, and the school programs we created, the Oakland Community School, has been replicated all over the world. We created free sickle cell anemia and testing programs, which we should bring back today. And we did all of these things really without money, with just the goodness of our hearts and our bodies, and with donations from people like you, and with the donation of time and resources from skilled doctors, dentists, and other professionals for what we were doing. So what do we do today, though? That's history. What about right now? What do we need now? Do we need those same things now? Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We could get rid of all the wars in the world. They're unnecessary. It's unnecessary to send people off to war to be killed for reasons that are unclear and not justifiable. We could provide for all of our communities something more than a meager life. People could thrive if they were given the basic necessities, like free education and free health care. And we could regard, those of us who are over 40, could regard young people in high esteem rather than blaming them for behavior that they're not responsible for because they're not receiving all of the information they need to be influential members of our great world. We're not teaching people to be global citizens everywhere, even though we do so here at the College of Alameda. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to ask you if there's anything that you'd like to dialogue with me about. I have a short film clip I want to show you about what one thing I think we can do as we engage one another in our world, and that is to become allies for one another. Does anybody know what the word ally means? Take a guess. It doesn't matter. Who said that? A friend. What kind of friend? Someone you could depend on when you're gossiping? If you need assistance, and they're like right there, they got your back, right? And thank you. It's an ally is a particular kind of friend. Angela Davis was an ally like that for me. She's everybody's ally, actually. But yes. So the clip I'm going to show you before we leave one another is about being an ally. And I'll explain more about that later. But is there anything you want to talk about now? Yes. Hi, Karima. Yes. First of all, let me thank you for what you're doing. Thank you. And all of the people who you work with, will you thank them for me? Unless they're in this room. Wow. Can you tell people where Nairobi, Kenya is on the world map? East Africa. It's a beautiful place. Thank you. Well, what do I feel about all of that? I feel that it's great, it's needed. I feel that when women are liberated from the social, political, and economic shackles of, I want to say, institutional bias and violence, then whole communities, whole families are uplifted. So I think it's very important work, and I think that for us here to join with women around the globe is important, Africa and Asia. And I think that one of the things that we can do here in this country is to stop that violence ourselves, starting with ourselves, starting with the internalized violence that women have for other women. I don't know how to decorate anything, I'm sorry. And also that men get together and talk about the messages they've been given that are messages that create violence toward girls and women. These messages are given when people are very young. And we can also actively do things like work to stop the trafficking of girls and women and boys. So I think what you're doing is really very important, and thank you so much. Thank you. You had a question, my friend. Hi, Joseph. Mm-hmm. I don't see the exact thing in any part of history replicating itself exactly, but I have to say that I love the Black Lives Matter network. Love it. I think it's so powerfully important. And I knew it was important when people got their boxers in a wad just to hear the term and see the hashtag in front of it. It's not crazy. It's based in fear. Remember that when you think you're seeing, I read Mahatma Gandhi had a quote about this, and I'll booger it up if I try to give you his exact beautiful quote. But he said that often when we think we're seeing hatred, it really is fear. Now think of, isn't it? That's what racism is. It's pure fear. There isn't another way to explain it. And then when it's institutionalized, it's fear on steroids. And so, Black Lives Matter really touches my heart. And since I've met some of the women who coined the term, I know their hearts, their intention, no matter what thing happens somewhere else with the name Black Lives Matter attached to it. If it's negative, it's nothing that they are doing. We're all human beings, and we take things and employ them in the best way that we know how. So, yes, I think it's already happening. It's always happening. Revolution is not a something that happens it's not an event. It is a constant turning away from the darkness to the light. And I'm saying that in a way that you probably have never heard revolution described before, but I do so intentionally because I know that that is what has happened inside my own heart. Darkness clouds what we're seeing and how we're feeling and how we step out. So why did the Black Panther Party end? Because the FBI's COINTELPRO really did what it said it was going to do. It used taxpayers' money, and they did their job. And they harassed, surveilled, they made us paranoid. I'm saying us because it was a big we. We worked in coalition. We were called the vanguard of the Black Panther Party because we worked in coalition with everyone. It was a nickname, but this is because people like Fred Hampton said to the leader, the person who became the leader of the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican organization that was a gang, he said, "Why y'all killing each other? Puerto Rican people should stand up for one another. Go out there and educate your people." And so Chacha Jimenez said to Fred, he told me, he said to Fred, "So should we call ourselves the Brown Panthers?" So he goes, "No, man. Keep your name, Young Lords, and go out there and educate people." And it spread like wildfire. Just mostly Midwest to East Coast, unlike the Black Panther Party that was global. But that's how we were. And so J. Edgar Hoover and others, even the CIA was involved, couldn't let that happen. They were afraid. That's why Fred was killed. What point am I making? I'm making the point that the harassment, particularly of Huey Newton and Bobby Seale and other visible members of the Black Panther Party, and some not so visible, were targeted and killed or jailed on ridiculous charges. Have you been noticing that recently members of the Black Panther Party are being pardoned and released from prison after 37 years, 27 years in solitary confinement? Tupac's mother was a member of the Black Panther Party, Afeni Shakur. And so this wearing away at spirit, this wearing away at our minds, this wearing away at our bodies got to some people. And those of us who didn't have the stamina, because it was hard to have the stamina, we were like, after a little while, the walking wounded. And so it took its toll. And toward the end, the numbers dwindled, and the people in positions of leadership left, and that left some people in leadership who were severely addicted to all kinds of things. And that became the end. Is that a sufficient answer for you? You're welcome. It's about, thank you. It's about 10 minutes after 1, and I'm told I have until 1:30. Is that accurate? It is? Okay. I don't see the, just a second. So I wanted to know if it, yes, almost. I wanted to know if anybody had another question, or if there was some other topic not related to the Black Panther Party that you wanted me to speak about. Yes. How did what? Oh. Just brothers? What was our strategy? We brought together, it was, I wish I could take it out of my head and show it to you. Every kind of person in our hugely diverse community of African Americans and Latinos and poor white people and Asians and Latinos, Chicanos, Latinos at the time, wanted to be a part of this movement. And so we wanted to work together because in numbers, we could have the stamina to continue to work against these powerful systems that wanted us to die. So our strategy was undying love for the people. So we were so focused on serving the people that, and we had internal things so that we could talk to one another if conflict arose. That love was our focus. It wasn't always that we were able to love each other like we said we loved the people, but we did try. Did you know we were median age 19 years old? I'm serious. I joined the party when I was 18. John Huggins was assassinated. He was 23. Bunchy was 26. So we were so young and enthusiastic, and there's a way in which we were naive about the powers we were standing up to. So we're still healing now. That strategy worked to a point, but one thing we did not have was a way to take care of ourselves and one another. Thank you for that great question. Anything else? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Are they interrelated, and are they cases of the same existence?
Sounds like you have the answer to your question. Oh. Well, power is a beautiful thing. We're all born with it. It allows us to see and hear and speak. It allows us to love. But in working with children over the decades, I've watched if children are not loved, what happens with that power? If they're scarred and traumatized, what happens? And the darkness I'm talking about is not, it's like either the absence of light in a room, or in our hearts is the absence of the recognition of light. I don't mean that to sound like a riddle, it's not. But for instance, what would have to have happened to J. Edgar Hoover, a human being, born from his mother, for him to act with such a disregard for humanity. That's another way of looking at the word darkness. The love was not there. Perhaps other things were vacant there. I don't know, I'm not him. But when I looked into my own heart, when I was in solitary confinement and looked at places inside that I can only call dark, they had to do with understandings of myself that were inaccurate, or understandings of parts of my life that I didn't have all the pieces put together, or the emotional reaction that comes from being hurt. Anger, hurt, fear. So I was able to look at those things. I can't speak for what anybody else would do. And then structures, it's really simple. This room has an infrastructure, right? We cannot see it. But what if inside the walls, the infrastructure was rotten? What would eventually happen? Yeah, the roof would probably fall on us. So it's important to look at not the room, not just the room we're in other words, not just the country we're in, but what is the infrastructure that's making it run? That's the best I can do with your huge, gigantic question.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nobody asked you to heal anything when people wanted to join the Black Panther Party, if I'm understanding your question. We didn't even think like that then. Maybe I did because I was a closet meditator, but not many people thought like that. We just wanted to go out there and do what we could do. And we didn't have very much to help us heal. For instance, 28 of us were killed. Many more arrested. There was a point after which I couldn't cry at a funeral. I couldn't cry. So the healing happened later, as much as possible. These are great questions. This film clip is produced by World Trust. It's an organization that creates films to foster conversations about racial inequity, which is a high leverage conversation to have. Because if we can have conversations about racial inequity, we can have conversations about almost any other kind of inequity. Isn't it true? But we have an allergy to talking about race in this country. And these films reduce the allergy. So we can have conversation, not just start a conversation, but stay in a conversation about race. The film clip I'm going to show you is an amazing woman, Joy Leary, who is an anthropologist, an educator, and a psychologist. And she's telling a story of what happened to her one day in the supermarket. You know, it's one thing to talk about movements and talk about history. That's sort of abstract in a way, but to talk about what we can do in our daily lives is another thing.
Who's half black, half white, but looks white. Blue eyes, whiter than most white folks, very white. She and I, we kind of grew up together. We raised our children together. So they're first cousins, and it's a wonderful, very, very multicultural family. So we're going in a Safeway one day, and Kathleen, my sister-in-law, is in front of me, and she's, writing a check for her groceries. Now, my daughter, who at the time was 10 years old, was standing with me, and I was directly behind her, getting ready to get my groceries. So Kathleen comes up, and the checker, who's a strawberry blonde, freckled, very delightful, warm, the checker, this young woman, is talking to Kathleen. Hey, how you doing? It's a nice day today. They're just chatting up, and says, yeah. So Kathy writes her check, and she steps off to the side with her groceries because she's waiting for me. Of course, again, Kathleen looks white, right? So I come up. No conversation. She looks up at me. Absolutely no, just little chatter. And I write my check. My daughter, however, is 10, notices immediately the difference in how she responds to me. So I write my check, and she goes, I'm going to need 2 pieces of ID. At which point, my daughter looks at me, and she gets very, very embarrassed, and tears are kind of coming from her eye, like, Mommy, you're not gonna let her do this. Why is she doing this to us, right? So I'm trying to figure out what I should do, because behind me are 2 elderly white women, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so then I become the angry black woman, right? And they're gonna be, and I'm just trying to second guess all the drama. So then I just give her the 2 pieces of ID. I said, you know, some things you gotta choose your battles, right? And then it gets worse. She pulls out the bad check book, right? So this is the book that shows the people who've written bad checks. So she starts searching for my license in the bad checks, at which point it's just out of control now. Just as I'm standing there trying to decide what to do, and it's really deeply humiliating. Now my daughter is in full-blown emotionally upset, who's 10. My sister-in-law walks back over, and she steps in and she says, excuse me, why are you doing this? And the checker goes, well, what do you mean? She goes, why are you taking her through all of these changes? Why are you doing that? She goes, well, this is our policy. She goes, no, it's not your policy because you didn't do that with me. Oh, well, I know you've been, she goes, no, she's been here for years. I've only lived here for 3 months. And so at this point, the 2 white elderly ladies go, I can't believe what this checker has done with this woman. It is totally unacceptable. At which point, the manager walks over. So the manager walks over and says, is there a problem here? And then my sister-in-law again responds, she goes, yes, there is a problem here. Here is what happened. So you see, she used her white privilege, and even though Kathleen is half black and half white, she recognizes what that means. And she made the statement. She pointed out the injustice. And she, as a result of that one act, influenced everyone in that space. But what would have happened? I can't know for certain had the black woman said, this is unfair, why are you doing this to me? Would it have had the same impact? But Kathleen knew that she walked through the world differently than I did. And she used her white privilege to educate and make right a situation that was wrong. That's what you can do every single day.